Hello and welcome back to Antique Dust and continuing our gay, queer, LGBTQ, rest of the alphabet plus films and dramas and television and whatnot. We're covering Dun Dun Dun, It's a Sin! That's another Russell T Davies. We covered one of his pieces, Queer as Folk, in a previous episode. It's a Sin was brought out, I think, 2 years ago?
It was 2021.
Oh my gosh, is it that long now?
It's that long now.
Wow.
I know.
So it first aired in 2021. Pandemic years. They seem so long ago, don't they?
I know.
So... but It's a Sin is it's sort of set in the 1980s in England, in London, as the AIDS epidemic.
Yes, it's sort of like just as it's starting to unfold, really. Just, the very first episode starts to show just the emergence of rumours and talk about there being
gay cancer,
being a gay flu.
So Russell T Davies had the embryonic idea for this story over 20 odd years ago, but every time he started to write it, he wanted to give people the justice and the drama he wanted to drive. He wanted it to be a joyful experience, not another one of these sort of kill your gays, which is so sort of
it's all part of that whole trope, isn't it, of the bury your gays. If there's a gay character, they're in some one way or another they're going to end up dead.
Yeah, they're either comic relief or the tragic character that dies a very lonely existence or death. So the story follows a ragtag band of really lovely and characterful people. We have, I'd say, they're sets. It starts with Richie. Now, Richie is a young boy. It's going off to university, first year at university, and he's meant to be going to study law. He's from the Isle of Wight, so quite a protective, insular environment, but he's completely aware of that. But he's also very aware of his own sexuality. But when he goes to London to university to read law, he starts his sexual awakening and then decides he doesn't want to be a lawyer, he wants to be an actor, because there's
the person he fancies is on an acting
course, and then he makes his best friend. So the main characters we've got Richie, which is the protagonist, which we're following his story through, but we've also following the stories of the friends that he meets and interacts with and lives with. And so he's got his best mate, which is Jill, which is his fag hag. Roscoe, who we introduced to Roscoe, and he's got a very strict Nigerian family,
very religious upbringing. They're trying to cure him
because they found a paper of him, the Gay Times, with and they're sending him back to Nigeria to get him sorted out. But he's working on a building site. His dad picks him up. He's not allowed to do anything, and his sister says, "Look, they're going to send you away, and you won't be coming back. So here's some money. You need to go, and you need to go now."
Yeah. But her interest is not so much in stopping him from being sent back, is that she's worried that they'll all have to go back to Nigeria, and she's not prepared
to do that.
So,
so Roscoe makes a very dramatic exit to a disco beat, which is very delicious.
In a crop top and miniskirt.
I had one of those transparent umbrellas, those plastic umbrellas, and it's just, the visuals of that were just class. Then we introduced to Colin. Now, Colin is from South Wales, from the Valleys, and he's arriving to do his apprenticeship as a tailor, a gentleman's tailor on Savile Row. And he's renting a room in a boarding house with the family. He's got rented a box bedroom. And then we have Ash, which is the sort of the love interest to Richie, and
sort of on-off.
They have an on-off
relationship,
situationship, love interest. They keep coming backwards and forwards. And Keely Hawes plays Valerie Tozer, which is Rich's mum, and she does such a great job. Very underplayed, but a very...
And she should have got a BAFTA.
Did she get a BAFTA?
No, she didn't.
She didn't, no.
That's what I said. She should have got a BAFTA, but she didn't.
Yeah, it was very, very sad. And we actually have an episode with Neil Patrick Harris playing another tailor called Henry Coltrane, who introduces Colin to the delights of gay life in London. And sort of showing how gay life can be, because he's got his partner from Portugal that he's been living with for many years. So
they become the first victims that we come across.
First episode, it sets everyone up. You're loving everyone. There's a sort of Colin becomes part of the group from. Meets them in the bar, ends up at a house party, and ends up renting a room in this apartment, which has been nicknamed the Pink Palace, which is sort of a massive apartment above a parade of shops, and there's a big gang of them. They all live together in one big melting pot.
It's a found family story.
Yeah, so it's a logical family, as Armistead Maupin would say, and the epidemic comes about, and it's how it affects everybody. There's a tragic story with one of the friends that doesn't live in the Pink Palace, who's a bus driver, and he's one of the first people that come down with the sort of the effects of sort of AIDS and HIV. So and sort of Jill sort of helps him out, but his family then take him away. And then we see at the end of the episode 2, basically he's been taken away from his whole friendship group, and he's died off camera, and they're literally having a massive bonfire with his bed, his possessions, his photographs, and everything on a big burning pile, a bonfire in the back of the garden. And it's just such a tragic thing because it was just thought it was meant to be a gay disease. And it just showed, I think that was a really impactful situation. I mean, on the first episode, we see that Henry has died because Henry doesn't come into work, and Colin sort of goes to find him, and he's been told he's gone to hospital. And then he said, "Oh, I've got this cancer, but it's the cancer which is how they say that you'd see it in a 90-year-old, not someone that's a healthy sort of like late 30s person." And he's in this isolated ward on his own. Everyone has to dress, sort of food just gets dropped at his door, and he's obviously very sick, so he has to go to his door to pick his food up, which is just horrible. And it just shows the impact where it's just like that whole, everyone was being treated like, that had it was being treated like a leper. And it was just, it happened before my time. It was happening in my childhood. But I think I was quite protected because I lived in London at this time when this was all happening. And I do remember a friend that lived a few doors down, Joanna. They had a friend who was an older boy that was friends with Joanna's son, Joanna's older brothers. And he was an airline steward. And he was always coming in, and he was like sort of any time I was around there, he always came around. He always had all these gifts because he was going backwards and forwards to New York and all these fantastic stories, and he had his sort of always glamorous candies and sweets and things like that, and it was always larger than life. And literally, I remember going around and then said, "Oh, he's died of AIDS," and it was just so matter of fact because Joanna's dad was a surgeon, and her mum was an anaesthetist. So I mean, they obviously weren't dealing with that element, but they were quite matter of fact. So it was very sad, and that was it. And that was my first real. Oh, what's this? I always knew he was fan boy. I think at the time I was only 8, 9 at the time. And it was just the first person I'd never been to a funeral. I didn't go to his funeral, but I'd never been to a funeral, and none of my family had died at that point. So it was just like someone I knew, because he was like every time I'd been round or anything like that, and even at Christmas he sort of dropped round with a present and things like that, because we were only a few doors down, and it was just like, wow, when it hit home. And now watching this, it just feels even more sort of concerning.
Yeah.
But this series is just, it's joyful, but it's also incredibly tragic. So we see Ollie sort of develop
Richie.
it. So Richie, played by Ollie Alexander, who it's his first real screen acting role. And he nails it, because
he does very well.
Ollie Alexander is a pop singer for the years and years, and
the years and years.
Is it years and years?
Yeah, just the way you said it you sounded like my granny or something. It was with the years and the years. Well, just made me chuckle. Sorry,
but So I think it's a bit like when. Billie Piper went into Doctor Who in 2005. Everyone thought, oh God, she's going to be crap.
Yeah, and I will hold my hand up and say that I probably was one of them. But there you go.
But she's totally nailed it, as did Ollie Alexander as Richie Tozer, because you see him coming out to himself and his sexual awakening, and there's a lot of montages in their first episode. There's lots of sex scenes and a montage of sex scenes with various guys.
He has a lot of sex.
He has a lot of sex with a lot of people, but it's in a incredibly joyful, exuberant, fun way, and you just felt the energy levels there. And as the epidemic's coming about, as in episode 2, it's just like, oh, right, it doesn't exist. It's just something to make up to make us not have any fun or anything like that. And as the story goes along, say Gloria is no longer there, and then Gloria is dead. It was the bus driver, and then everyone goes and gets tested, but he doesn't open up his results and continues life as it was. And then he meets another actor that he gets into a relationship with, and then he becomes unwell and goes home, and he's got an agent, this agent says,
played by Tracy Ann Oberman,
who's lovely, completely. So Russell T Davies, when they do the casting for the roles he writes for, he gets really good, strong actors, and they even though the words aren't, there's not a lot of dialogue. The dialogue they've got is very pointed, and she was saying, don't be one of those that goes home and doesn't come back. And I thought that it was very, very telling, and that actually is a foretelling of what happens with regards to Richie's character, because he becomes sick, his parents come and see him in hospital, and basically take him back home, and he dies, and the family won't let him see his friends and won't let friends see him. And there's a really joyful moment where he says to his mum, when he's sort of hours away from dying, I don't regret any of it. I remember the houses, I remember the living rooms, I remember the bedrooms, I remember the going up the stairs and what the artwork was, and I remember their faces, so many faces. And that was just so telling. And I think there was Russell T Davies did a really fantastic job of, it's making it very tragic but very human and very
So the character of Richie was actually based on a real, well, I suppose we don't go too far, inspired by a real person, a real actor, Dorothy McClendon, who was from the Isle of Man rather than the Isle of Wight, and was in a Doctor Who story, as indeed Richie is. But that's essentially Richie's story is paralleling Dorothy McClendon's.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh. So with we've seen an interview and a documentary after watching sort of the It's a Sin, and the lady who had the Pink Palace. There was a Pink Palace.
The real Jill.
The real Jill. And she was at drama school, and Russell was at Cambridge. Or was it Oxford? I can't remember. Cambridge or Oxford. And he was going down at the weekends to go and party and everything, and all these larger than life characters were around and about and coming through, but she was in the middle of the whole maelstrom where everything was just collapsing around you. And it's just such a tragic story. I mean, there's some really good positive stories that come out of this, and the one which really, I mean, Richie, he was the one that was unabashed and became
He was the promiscuous.
He was the promiscuous one, but then you had Colin, who was the Welsh boy from the Valleys, and he literally had slept with one person. Which was his landlady's son. They had sex a few times, and it was just such a tragic story because he was just emerging and becoming what he could be, and he was being quite joyful, and then he was literally struck down, and it showed the various ways it could affect with regards to sort of like an element of dementia that could be part of it, or the lesions and the coughing and that sort of thing. So it did show the tragic areas where things you would waste away, and his one really resonated because I think he played it so well as like an innocent abroad, and everyone was really shit.
Yeah.
So
and essentially that was the purpose of the character. I mean, all the characters have a purpose, and the purpose of his character was to show the randomness and the cruelty.
I mean, that was the thing with regards to the first sort of friend's death, because we had Henry was the first death, and then we had Gloria, who was the bus driver, and he was really ashamed because I don't sleep around like the rest of them, and yet I've got it. And Colin, I mean, I think Colin his one just happened so quickly. He was just literally, he got fired from his job as the tailors because he got taken over to America, and he picked up all the literature on HIV and AIDS in America, and
his boss saw it.
His leery boss that was always trying to
wash him,
to wash him and get with him, saw him, and he ended up getting fired, and then he ended up working in a photocopier shop.
Yeah, it was a copy shop,
and then literally collapsed, and then he was dead.
Yeah.
And it turns out it was a really nice, it was really well done parallel, because while Colin's mum was in there with Colin, the guy who was sleeping with him, the landlady's son, and she's shouting, "But he's not gay. He shouldn't be here. I don't know why he's got this." And he's in a bed a few rooms down, sort of thing. So it showed the shock of the parents and how the parents dealt with it, and it's harrowing, but it's so well done.
It's very well done. I mean, it's not above criticism.
What would you criticize?
So the two main criticisms that are levelled at It's a Sin is, one is the lack of visibility of lesbians, because in terms of that era, lesbians were very much caretakers, and the usual lack of racial diversity.
I suppose
I'm merely reporting
what other people say.
The criticisms that are levelled at It's a Sin.
I mean, I suppose you have got one gay character.
One gay character.
No.
Just the one.
You've got one black character, but then you've got the Asian.
You do.
You've got Asian character. Ash is the Asian character. There wasn't any lesbians though. I think there's a smattering in a help desk somewhere. Further into it, but I suppose it's the story's telling of what it was for gay men.
Yeah,
So the gay men have to be the central sort of part of it, which I think is, and I think it is so well done. And having It's a Sin from the Pet Shop Boys being sort of
Yeah,
played.
I mean, you're talking about the soundtrack, then it is very iconic 1980s soundtrack with just pretty much anyone that you would expect to find from the 1980s on that soundtrack.
Oh, go on, list them off.
Well, Pet Shop Boys, Erasure.
Yeah. So I suppose they were like the club anthems, weren't they?
There's lots more than that, but I don't happen to have a list of them.
Okay. So, but overall, I think he did so well, and it got a lot of recognition, but it didn't get enough recognition in the awards ceremonies. It just seemed to be.
Well, of course not, because it's gay.
But it seems to be so overlooked because everyone was having, because there was the catchphrase "law," because they have a house party, have a party at the Pink Palace, and they're doing a turn, and the Richie character sort of comes up dressed up and acting all demure and literally just goes "law," and that's the group of friends catchphrase. And a t-shirt designer from London, he created a range of t-shirts with the La emblem on, and all those ones that were sold, all the money went through to I think it's Terence Higgins Trust, and I think they raised multiple hundreds of thousands of pounds for that charity because everyone had the La t-shirt because it was just very iconic. So, but it's a really fantastic snapshot, and it covers a real element of friendships, found family, shame, denial, and the element of activism and awareness. Where I think the gays that are coming out, the younger gays that are coming out now, they sort of, because HIV and AIDS, well, HIV is classed as a sort of a chronic illness, not a death sentence. And people have PrEP, which can save themselves from it. So if you and it just seems to be forgotten. It's like a sort of a
and
note.
Thankfully, I mean, that's not. It's on the one hand, it's about recognizing history, but on the other hand, the fact that it can be relegated to history is a good thing. It has to be a good thing.
I think it is it's a cracking thing to have done, and it's signposting it for future generations to see what actually happened, because it's so easy to whitewash over certain things. But I suppose with regards to the sort of the pandemic of HIV and what have you through the gay community, we had a worldwide pandemic, and that just seems to be, and that happened 2-3 years ago, and that just seems to be forgotten about. But that covered the whole of the world, not just one set element, where this affected an entire community. It basically virtually wiped out an entire generation.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we have to recognise that it was, it wasn't just gay men that were affected.
No, it wasn't just gay men. However, it was more prevalent with regards to gay men because it was based on sexual activity, and then it was blood transfusions and what have you.
And it wasn't exclusively gay sex either. You have to. I just think you need to. You don't want to get too single-minded, too focused on it was all about gay men, because it wasn't. And I think that's the wrong approach.
Yeah. Well, we are covering. There's a TV novella. Was it TV novella movie that we're covering in a next podcast? Which was set. That's another sort of gay one, but affecting from the straight perspective and the gay perspective, and which came out in the sort of 90s. So we'll be covering an element of that in the next podcast. So, do you think we've covered everything from...
Oh, I think we have.
So, dear listeners, what did you think of It's a Sin? If you've not seen it, you can get it on streaming services, and if you're in the UK, you can go on the Channel 4 website, and the episodes are all there for you to watch, savour, enjoy and comment upon. So you can find us all on all social media platforms at Antique Dust, and so it's Jonathan here signing off.
And Rob saying goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.